It's always a pleasure to welcome our very own pastors, and we have our Reverend Derek Boggs from Evangelical Covenant Church of Princeton. How are you, Pastor?
I'm doing just fine. It's good to be here. It's good to see you. And greetings to all the Central Conference people. I miss you all.
Yeah, it was such a loss not to have our Central Conference celebration. We had all of these great, amazing worship teams and speakers, and we were going to have a great time. And obviously, we weren't able to have our celebration due to COVID-19. Pastor, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your family.
Well, I pastor the second oldest still existing Covenant Church. We're 151 years old.
Wow.
I've been here for 10 years in August. And my wife, Jessica, and I have been married for 17 years also, coming up in August. And we have 3 kids. My son Levi is just turned 12. My daughter Eve will be turning 10 very soon, and my daughter Olive will be turning 6 this next month.
And they're the cutest kids. They're just cute and so well behaved. At least when I was in your home and when I was at in visiting your church.
You know what? They are very good kids, and they need some kind of special treat after all this COVID stuff, if we can ever get through it, because their little lives have been so disrupted, and we've been, Jessica and I have been more conservative in our social interactions because I'm around so many different things, and we haven't let the kids do what a lot of other people are letting their kids do. So,
yeah.
And their mom and dad have been cranky more.
There's a lot of things to be cranky about.
Yes, there are. And Jessica works on staff at the church as well. And so we had just lost an associate pastor. When was that? It was November, I believe. Pastor John Dietrich took a senior pastor role out in California. So suddenly we had just announced our search team on the last Sunday that we met. And then we had to shut everything down. And so it was just me and Jessica. It felt like we were like running the church by ourselves for a while.
Yeah. Now you have quite a bit of a background. You grew up in the Philippines, or you had you spent some time in the Philippines. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. When I was 9, my parents, they had always served in lay ministry, very, very active leaders in the church that we grew up in, a Pentecostal church. And they called us into the living room for a family meeting, me and my 2 siblings, my sister and brother. And I was like, what is this about? They said, we've got to share this with you kids. We feel like God is leading us in a new direction. And I sarcastically said, well, I sure hope it's not the mission field. I'm like, well, actually.
It wasn't sarcastically, it was prophetically.
Yeah, yes. So they said it's something we're praying about. We feel like God is calling us to serve in another country for a time in some way. So long story short, we ended up going to the Philippines when I was 10, and we lived there for a total of 3 years. So we were kind of long-term, short-term missionaries, but 3 years is a long time in kid years. And so it was my really formative kind of adolescence.
How old were you there?
From 10 to 14.
Wow. Did you learn a lot of Tagalog?
We did not. We lived in the Ilocos region, so we spoke Ilocano.
Ilocano, really? How different is that from Tagalog?
When I heard Tagalog speakers, there were things that sounded familiar, but they're different languages.
Right.
So I knew you would have to learn, at least from my perspective as a kid, when I heard people speaking Tagalog, I'm like, hey, I don't even know the basics. other than a few things that are similar. Hello, how are you? That kind of
I
stuff.
came to the United States when I was 13, when right in the middle of my developmental years as well. How did being in the Philippines during that time change your perspective, add your perspective? Uh, you know, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was I'd say it's complex. Looking back now as an adult, I suffered from significant kind of cultural displacement.
Mm.
Those were the days, and the missions organization my parents worked with, they didn't really do a lot of good training and preparation for people. It was just sort of come and plunge in.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't think they had a clue what that was going to be like for kids, especially my age, to be plunged into that
Yeah.
without better preparation. And so I struggled to relate. I struggled to relate to my peers there. I tended to do better with the adults. And I'm not a real athletic person, so if you didn't play basketball, sports can cross a lot of cultural barriers and language barriers, but that wasn't really my gig. So I think I struggled. I think I was pretty depressed, actually, looking back. So
Hmm.
that was kind of the difficulty. The positive side is it opens up my eyes. It opened my eyes up to the world in ways that I could never forget and in some ways, never feel at home in the same way in the United States. Because I realized that so many people around me, they have no frame of reference for life beyond their little town or their
Right.
suburb, their state, their region, this country. And I'm always thinking about the rest of the world. And I'm always thinking about what would this have been like or seemed like? How would Filipinos have processed this? At least the ones I knew in our area. So I think it just broadened my world in ways, you can't put the lid back on. Once you've seen how other people live and think and experience their culture and seen what people think of the United States, and it just
Yeah.
it just gave me a different perspective forever.
I feel that in the United States, so when I came at 13, I was, I had already learned all the capitals of the world, of the world's countries, major countries, aside Russia, when it became, Russia rather than the USSR, or some of the countries that became three different countries. But I knew most of the capitals of every country. Here in the States, we don't really care so much about geography.
No.
Or languages. That was very surprised at that as well. Though Spanish has been spoken here, and of course all of our native languages, we wanted to have one language, and English is spoken almost everywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But that was very surprising to me. That was very surprising to me.
I feel like it limits us, most of us Anglo folk, in ways that we're not even aware of. But in the Philippines, so we lived in the Ilocos region, which is the northern region of Luzon. I think that it may be the third biggest language group in the Philippines after Tagalog and Cebuano, if I recall correctly. Third or fourth. And most of those people were trilingual at least. They knew Ilocano, they knew Tagalog, and almost everyone knew some English. Then if you were in a smaller tribal group or on a border area, you might know two other languages. So I've often wondered, like, what is and you can probably explain a little bit, being fluent at least in two, if not more languages. I think your mind must process things differently.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
And Americans sort of struggle to step out of our world because we never have to.
Right. So there are, I speak Italian, and Spanish is my native language, and of course I speak English. But I love languages. I love French. I love German, and I don't speak them fluently at all, but I know some words. But there are things that you learn that you're like, that we don't have a word for that in English, and you have to explain it. And And part of living a life as an immigrant, since I came here when I was 13, I'm not really seen as an American here in my own country. When I go back to my native country of Guatemala, I'm not really seen as a Guatemalan anymore. I'm this washed up or Guatemalan that wants to be Guatemalan, but I don't even speak the same that we do, because in the United States we don't just have Guatemalans, we have Salvadorans and Dominicans and Mexicans, and we have 22 Latino countries that speak very differently from each other. And so I was talking to some friends saying that putting all Asian Americans in one place, it's how can you do that? Because Eastern Asia and it's so different than the rest of Asia, and of course anytime you have a church that gathers people from different nationalities, especially when Asians, there's some conflicts among certain countries. It's really a God thing to be able to do that. Tell us a little.
Well, I was just going to say, for example, I think the story of the Philippines is so different from every other Asian country. It's the only primarily Catholic country because of the Spanish colonization. It is a totally different experience than somebody right down the road, right across the South China Sea, Vietnam or China. And they have also their own histories of interacting with each other that haven't always been positive. If you think of World War II and many other things, each one of these Asian cultures has their own experience of each other. Of course, then they do kind of share some history of then interacting with white Western colonialism in different ways and at different levels. So that can bring some common ground, but it's, I know, the term Asian American or Latino, Latin American, it encompasses sometimes too much.
It does. You have a mixed family. You're a biracial couple, and your children are obviously biracial. It's just the most gorgeous kids I've seen. What has that dynamic brought to your ministry and to church life? Has that been I'm sure there has been some blessings with that and some teaching moments.
Whew, this is an interesting time to be asking that question. I grew up in Southern Ohio in the white working class community with deep roots to Appalachia. So all of my ancestors moved up from Kentucky in the 50s on both sides of the family to find industrial jobs in Ohio. They came out of sharecropping and coal mining backgrounds. So they brought, I didn't know this as a kid. I just thought it was normal, but I really grew up in a kind of a diaspora of Kentucky people. And so there are wonderful things about that culture, but one of the more difficult things is there tends to be a good deal of racism, overt and covert. And so I kind of grew up in a very white world. We were not around people of color at all, other than when we occasionally drove into the inner city. And that's when I begin to pick up all the negative messages. Oh, this is the dangerous part of town. This is scary. I think the implicit message was there's something wrong with these people. So I inherited a lot of that and participated in a racist subculture, and I'm not proud of that. I do think our time in the Philippines, again, proximity helps. It helps to be near people who are different and to approach them with an air of respect and learning. And I think that just changed many things about how I would approach life in the States. But I knew there were plenty of people who disapproved of interracial marriage, especially the older generation. So when I was at Gordon Conwell going to seminary, I met Jessica there, and we really hit it off. And I wasn't even sure what her ethnicity was at first. She's biracial. Her dad is black and mom is Caucasian, but I wasn't sure. And I remember when we started dating, and then I found out, there was part of me that was like, ooh, I really like her, but this might present some challenges.
Hmm.
So we navigated through that, and I experienced times of anger that I had to even feel self-conscious or self-aware in how I talked to my relatives. Ultimately, they all accepted her beautifully. A lot of it was simply ignorance and lack of ever being around anyone who wasn't white, and just continuing to think in terms of prejudices that had been handed down. So I think in terms of ministry, after seminary, I really started to get interested in reading history, and especially history that I felt I had not adequately understood. And that included the history of the Civil War, the Civil Rights era, Reconstruction, all these things, Native American history. And so I was kind of on my own little personal journey. But I think being married to Jessica helped, because suddenly I'm hearing personal stories from her African American family members about their experience, about her grandfather who had to move to Connecticut with his father because people got word to their family, you guys need to get out of here because they're going to be coming for you. He had gotten involved with the Garveyite movement, and anyway, they fled north. Jessica's grandfather worked in some kind of factory, and they had a more dangerous chemical area where they put all the black employees, and his cancer that took him at an early age no doubt stemmed from that. So beginning to hear these stories, and in addition to the reading I was doing, I'm like, there's a whole other aspect to this country that I have been clueless about. So I think being married to Jessica and interacting with her family has been very eye-opening. I think also when we were called to this church in rural America, which is very white, what we began to realize is that there are a lot of minorities in these towns who feel very isolated and alone. And I think when Jessica and I got here, some of them were like, oh, she looks like me. Maybe we can talk to them. And so there are times when I think people want to stay in areas that are more comfortable for them. But one of the things we found is that there are folks in small towns who can really receive ministry from an interracial couple, in addition to broadening the perspective of the white populace as well.
That has been my experience, Pastor. Lack of, I think prejudice, not lack of prejudice, but just prejudice is lack of understanding and lack of really of proximity, as you said. When we have people that are close to us, when we know people, when we have interactions and relationships, that really changes our paradigm of thinking. Even the fear. We've been taught certain people are dangerous or certain places are dangerous automatically, no matter who they are. But I think that a lot of our churches are just missing that relationship piece. Mm-hmm. If we can get them close enough for them to know that that our brothers and sisters are just like us, they have the same desires and hopes that we have of just being happy and being safe and secure, and that they don't really enjoy some of those things. I think that we will see a new dawning in our Christianity. I was very happy to visit ECC of Princeton. Just an amazing church. Doesn't look a day over 100. I don't know if you remember, I made that joke.
That's right.
I go, you're 150 years old. I was very privileged to be there for your 150th anniversary. And I said, 150? Come on, you don't look a day over 100. And only people that know me kind of laughed. Everybody else like, huh?
Did he just insult us?
Yeah, I found your church to be very welcoming. I had an incredible time there, especially with your leadership. Just an amazing church. Tell us a little bit about the church. Tell us, who your people are, who serves in your teams. Tell us a little bit about your interactions with the folks.
Well, this is a very old school covenant church, right down to the Swedish roots. And but in a lot of ways, we've really moved away from that Swedish flavor. Princeton, a lot of Swedes settled in Princeton, Illinois, because it was right along the railroad, and there were a lot of jobs around here as farmhands and other kinds of labor that immigrants could easily get. So quite a few Swedes. This was considered a Swedish town, but over the years that has changed quite a bit. And the church has changed as well, so that now I would say, we do still have a few. We have probably 4 or 5 families that go back 5 or 6 generations.
Oh, wow.
But we have people from all backgrounds. Our mission statement is that we want to be a place that invites people of all ages and backgrounds into a growing relationship with Christ. And over the last couple of years, we've really worked at that, and I'm very pleased. The kind of people coming in now are from all over the place, denominationally, or kind of lapsed in their faith, but may have had some church, back as children. We're predominantly white, but that is kind of the makeup of the town.
Right.
I think we want to find ways to grow in that area as we can, but I'm grateful for the diversity of backgrounds, even as a white church. And we live in an agricultural area. So Princeton is a county seat of one of the most beautiful farming counties in Illinois, Bureau County. You don't get very far from the land out here, and from thinking about harvest and planting and food and livestock. That's a big part of people's lives. And I have found that to be very grounding and centering in ways that I didn't experience in more suburban or urban contexts. And also, I think it helps us to, in some ways, connect with the biblical world. I mean, the Old Testament and the New Testament, but all these festivals are rooted in harvest and first fruits. And we still have a harvest festival that we celebrate every fall that originally started because that's when a lot of the farmers knew how much money they were gonna have for the year, and they could bring in some special gifts. And we still do that as a time for generosity, but also just getting together, thanking God for harvest and provision. So in our mission statement, we talk about inviting people of all backgrounds, but we're also inviting people of all ages. We have worked very hard over the last several years to become more intergenerational in our worship and discipleship and in our ethos and how we think about everything we do. Is it welcoming of children? Is it making a place for them? And is it giving us a way even to hear their voice? And I think our church has begun to get a reputation for that in Princeton, that we value children, not as the future, but as the present.
The church, right.
They're part of the ecclesia right now. They teach us maybe as much or more as we teach them. So I would say the last couple of years have been very exciting. A lot of growth, a lot of new families, not because of some grand master strategy. I'm not that kind of person. I have ideas and goals, but it will be interesting to see what happens after COVID. I feel like that kind of brought things to a grinding halt.
Right.
And now we're trying to keep people connected as best we can, but it's just a very different feel.
Right. One of the things that your church has done, they've been a generous partner to one of our church plants.
Yes.
But there's also been some interaction. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So back when David Swanson was the part-time church planting guy for the Central Conference, I had talked to him. I said, man, I think existing churches should be partnering with church plants. And he and I had those conversations. And then he really began to put some action steps together. And initially I thought, let's partner with another church like ours in a rural area, maybe, that's trying to get started. But then he said, you got to meet this guy. And he introduced me to David Washington, who was going to plant a church in the Roseland neighborhood of South Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I just loved David. I loved his heart. I loved his solidness in the word and in character. And the more we talked, I thought, wait a minute, this isn't exactly what I was thinking of, but this could be very, very good. Why not have an existing rural white church partner with a Black church plant in South Chicago? I think we could learn and grow a lot. And we have done that now. This will be probably our 5th year working with them. And they're moving out of the church plant stage, but we've had opportunities to visit the church a few times. We've had opportunities to welcome David and his family several times, and one time a number of their church people came out and we could just spend time getting to know each other. And this is what you're talking about, that most of us don't have these opportunities to relate as churches, much less, as individuals, much less as churches. So this has been eye-opening. And when I need to talk about issues of racial injustice or things like that in my church, I can say, these are our brothers and sisters we're talking about. Our brothers and sisters at Kingdom Covenant are facing these kinds of things. David also was my partner on a Sankofa journey. And I can't tell you how bonding and rich that is, to go on a journey with someone with whom you will continue in relationship.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've learned tons from him. He has reached out to me during this crisis just to check in on me. How are you doing? And sometimes I felt like I was barely hanging on, and I'm like, I just needed that. So this has by no means been a one-way partnership. It has been, we had financial resources, but they had a vision and an experience of church that we needed to get a perspective on that's enriched us all.
They are a very solid church, just a solid church. David is a great church planter. His wife as well, just very, just incredible people. God is using them powerfully. And I know they're very, very grateful for the financial partnership, but sincerely, I believe they're more grateful for the overall partnership with being able to have brothers and sisters. Even though you're not near each other, you're probably 3 hours away from each other, right?
2 hours.
2 hours. Oh, that's right. He's in the far south. So 2 hours still a nice drive, and sometimes we don't want to drive 15 minutes, nevertheless 2 hours. But so thank you for modeling that for us. And, I truly appreciate that. And of course, some people may not know, you and I have developed a friendship over this past 3 years. I have found you to offer really great counsel to me when I have needed you. So I want to tell you that I appreciate that. I appreciate having that camaraderie.
Thank you. You've been a tremendous blessing and partner to me and to our church. To be able to invite you to the 150th anniversary, that was a really big deal for this church.
It was a big deal for me.
And and I've told the church, not in any way to boast, because it speaks to God's faithfulness and to good leaders and good lay involvement down through the years.
Sure.
But I said, there are a lot of 150-year-old churches who haven't made it, or who didn't make it to that, or who
That's
are
right.
just hanging on with a little handful of people. And God has really been faithful, and it was wonderful to have you there. And
Thank you.
celebrate and help us celebrate.
I enjoy that. And I don't know if you've noticed, I like celebrations.
I have noticed that. I have
I
indeed.
like celebrations. Well, I want to thank you for your time today, Pastor. Thank you for your leadership. We're looking forward to great things from ACC Princeton. And yeah, we believe that during this time of COVID, we're all learning great lessons. And thank you for pastoring your church well during this time. Please give your wife and your children a big hello on our behalf, and let them know that we appreciate them.
I will do that. And if I could just say one final thing, this COVID season has probably been the hardest time of my life in ministry. And I've had some hard times. And I don't know how the rest of our pastors are doing out there. I'm concerned about pastors because I've been concerned about myself.
Yeah.
The kinds of burdens that we are being asked to bear right now, without the normal kinds of feedback that help us feel better about our work and ourselves. Tremendously difficult time, and I just want people to know they're not alone.
No.
And I know they can reach out to you all anytime, but to me as well, and other pastors, anybody, just reach out to someone and know that you have friends on the journey.
One thing has been exposed during this time has been the loneliness of many pastors in not having appropriate accountability partners and people just to offer support. And part of the reason we do these conversations, Pastor, is to show what healthy ministry looks like and what are some of the things that we can do to better take care of ourselves. And so, yeah, we're grateful for you. And our job is to continue to care for our pastors. And we are as close as their phone if any of our pastors need us. So thank you, Pastor. Blessings to you and blessings to your church.